Hey, and welcome to New Milford's first unaffiliated campaign broadcast, where politics are going to take a back seat to some really cool conversations tonight. My name is Ashley Russo, and I'm here with the lovely Hillary Ram, and we're about to have a really cool conversation. So, let's go. Hello, darling.
Hello.
I'm happy that we are actually here doing this. This is really cool.
This is really cool. Me too. I'm happy to be here.
Good. So, let's talk about why we're here. Give it to me, Hillary. Me a little bit about your story and what we're doing right now, because this is like wild. This is really wild.
This is really wild. What a long, strange trip it's been. It is interesting because when I think about my journey here, I go kind of all the way back because starting at a very young age, national politics were everything to me because my family at dinner time, we would have quiz time, and either my mom or my stepfather would ask us a current event question every night, and the winner, it was kind of a big deal. So at a young age, I started reading the newspaper every day because I wanted to be that winner. And, so it just kind of got sewed into me, reading the newspaper and getting interested in those current events. And at that time, my mom was a Republican and my stepfather was a Democrat. So we had different opinions around the table, family conversation. And then I went to high school and I got really into poetry, writing poetry, reading poetry. I took this incredible ethics class that was really impactful, where I started thinking about concepts of justice and fairness. And I grew up in New York City in the 80s, where you could really say there was a motto, like you could have it all. In fact, you're supposed to have it all. And in high school, in this class, I started thinking about, how's this going to work? If everybody has it all, is there going to be enough? And it doesn't seem like everybody has the same. It seems a little unfair. So I started grappling with those questions then, and I went to college and I chose my major, political science, to try to get involved in maybe answering some of those questions or being part of the solutions. But still, the curriculum in college was national politics, international politics. I took constitutional law and studied different governments around the world and all these kinds of things. So it was very much part of who I was. And I graduated from college. I worked on presidential campaigns. And, flash forward to when I got married and had my son, we wanted to leave the city, leave New York, and we moved up to Connecticut. And it was the 2016 election. And it didn't go the way that I'd wanted. Trump won, and I wanted to get involved. So I, did what was available to me at that time, got involved locally here in New Milford, and I won a seat on the town council here in New Milford in 2021. And I served for 2 years on town council. And while I was on town council, I had this, I really did a 180 in terms of realizing that local politics, local issues are really the most important thing on a day-to-day basis for people's lives. I mean, if you're going to really impact someone's life, it's local issues. So I just kind of dug into that deeply, and I'm sort of a nerd. I mean, I watch the town council meetings all the time. I go back and read, all the past minutes of the boards and commissions, because I just find it really interesting, because now I know some of the people and I know all of these places, and this place has become very important to me. So I didn't get reelected in 2023, and I'm a full-time teacher. I'm a Montessori teacher, so I just, was doing my family thing and being my teacher. And I started to just be on the outside of it, and watching our town government operate from the outside. And I can't help but feel, I just felt so frustrated by, how the town was being run and in my opinion, sort of mismanaged. And it felt frustrating to be on the outside. So I feel like I had to jump in. And particularly, there was one issue that when I was on council, it was brought to our attention that that there was PFAS in our water. And there was a resident who was very concerned, and then lo and behold, other residents were testing their water and it was coming back positive. And the level of brush it under the rugness that was dealt with was really hard to watch when I was there on council. And then that issue really escalated once I was off, and to watch how they, they really did not do what government is supposed to do, which is to help people, especially in some sort of like an emergency situation,
right,
like PFAS in our water. So that was a wake-up call, and a lot of other issues, which I hope we can dive into, really led me to want to run for mayor. So I am running for mayor because I believe that New Milford deserves better. And I am, committed to working on fiscal responsibility, on clean water, and on safe streets. Those are really 3 things that I feel committed to. And yeah.
I love that. Great. So I just want to say my own kind of experience getting to this place, because 2 years ago, if you had said I'd be sitting here across from you, I'd have been like, you're crazy. Actually, maybe not. Oh, yeah, maybe. 2 years ago, yeah. So I have had quite a different political experience. I grew up in a very different situation, and we never really talked about politics whatsoever. It was very foreign to me. So, and I guess to my advantage, that was a good thing, because it played out really well. And didn't really pay attention to it much in school. Just had this underlying faith that things were being taken care of, and that the people that did understand it were voting the right people in, and the government takes care of it, and the government takes care of you. And I think that there was a big part of indoctrination that happens inside maybe the public school systems a little bit, because you're just kind of like taught to believe that. And I had my children. I have a family. I have 4 kids. And I've spent a whole lot of time mothering them. And along the way, I went from Western medicine, working in EMS down in Norwalk and Stanford, and then I got into nursing. And then when my daughter was diagnosed with autism, I got kind of picked up out of that reality and put in the holistic world. So I started learning really just how indivisible we are from our surroundings and from nature and from each other, and how we're all interconnected, and we're all this one really amazing harmonic organism, and that we all depend on each other, and we depend on our outside resources, and how all of them matter. Every bit of it matters. And I remember I was in this group thread, and somebody had brought into the thread a conversation about farming and regenerative agriculture, which I happened to be just learning about. And I was so lit up, because I'm like, yes, this is the farming of the future. Like, this is what we need to be doing, because it produces healthy soil and then healthy crops, and then that breeds healthy humans. And that's legitimately my whole entire platform. So we went and I talked at the town, and I was really shocked almost immediately at the large disconnect between what I was saying and really the true mechanics of Earth, and the disconnect at the receiving table from this information. They had really little respect for what I was saying. And I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone, to be quite honest, because I was like, okay, this is actually the mechanics of Earth, and you're not open to even listening or hearing or talking about some sort of possibility of change, or just accepting what I'm saying and having a dynamic conversation about it. Let's at least have a conversation about it. So I spoke a couple times, and that really didn't go very well. And then later the water came up. And now again, like, okay, this is a big deal, because this is in my hometown. My brother I didn't grow up in the political family conversations because my brother had leukemia, which is an environmental cancer. So I grew up inside the hospital, and that's what I did as a child. So the environmental toxins are really important for me because this is an unnecessary part of life that humans have to go through, and we're the ones in control of it. So spreading awareness and education is important. So when we started talking at the town again about clean water, it was the same result again. And I almost immediately was like, these land and water and air are the most important things to human beings. End of story. And if they're not being receptive, and if they're not intaking what we're saying, then something needs to shift here. And that was very clear to me. So I almost kind of stepped away until I was able to regain a frame and say all right, where are we going to go now? Obviously, this is the direction that we were all pulled in, which is amazing. But because you can't fix the problem from the same level of consciousness that created the problem, you need to take it a little bit higher. So it's very obvious that there is a group of people sitting in our government right now who understand Earth at the level that they understand it in, and that's the field that they operate in, and that's totally fine. But things need to be done in order to straighten out the direction that we're going here in our town, and then on a bigger level. And there is a large group of people who want that reality to come in and to have that paradigm shift. And there's a really good group of people who want to help steer us in that direction. So I am part of that group of people. I would love to sit on town council in New Milford along with you as our mayor. And without further ado, let's talk about some of these topics because they're wild, right? Starting with water.
Yep.
Water, that's crucial. It's crucial. Let's go.
It is crucial. And to bring it back a little bit, because I should have said, because we're sitting here and we're going to talk about some of these issues, that I think it's really important that, I don't feel like I'm coming here with all the solutions. I feel like I am here to have this conversation, which I think is what government is about, is communication with many different opinions and trying to come to some type of movement forward. But I believe I'm confident in my ability to listen, to bring more people to the table, to invite dissent and different opinions, because I really do believe that collaboration and transparency in the process is how you engage people. And right now, the number of people that watch our town council meetings and the number of people that vote on our budget every year is embarrassing. And what it means is that we don't have people engaged in the process because it feels distant, like your experience coming. I was sitting there listening to you on town council, and I fear that our council isn't working the way that it was intended to work, which is as a deliberative body. You're not supposed to walk in that door with your answer already predetermined. You're supposed to be listening fully. We call it in school full body listening.
Amen. I love that.
And I fear that that's not happening. It's really just a predetermined. It's a performance, and it shouldn't be.
That's what it felt like, right?
Yeah, and so I think that I'm excited to talk about these issues because even though I'm not, ready to say this is the way forward, it's just an opening of the dialogue that is really late coming, right? Because these problems are here; they're on our doorstep. And they need smart thought, right?
Right.
So what should we talk about?
And service.
Yes, right. Yes, that's right. We were we were talking the other day about this campaign and the values of the campaign, and we were batting words around. And I think that collaborative we agreed on, transparent, and then you said a word that I just thought was absolutely so important, which was service. And you want to say something about that? Because
to the points of collaboration and transparency, they all work hand in hand. And in that conversation, you really lit me up. And I knew that we were going to be able to work so well together because you look at government the same way I look at the human body. All of it is interconnected and all of it is interdependent on each other. And there isn't one department on an island that operates independently. They all come together harmoniously, and that's how it's supposed to be, a holistic approach, including the community and including the households and the individuals that live here. And a big problem that I see online, especially in our social media pages online, is the lack of transparency and the disconnect that there is between the community and our government. It seems as if they are on a hill all by themselves and they make decisions without the input of the community. And these are supposed to be public servants that are supposed to intake information from the community and then, to your point, make decisions based on that. So you're right. When we were talking, you kept saying collaboration, transparency. And I loved that because that's not what we're getting right now from our current administration. And then bringing that to the table and being able to shift the paradigm in New Milford will allow us to then be of service, because we want public participation. We want public feedback. We want people to feel like they bring a voice to the table that is heard. And when you do that from a place of heart and you hold space for people, then you can actually show up and then you can actually make change in an appropriate fashion based on and reflection of what the individuals in this town actually want, and not kind of looking outside of this town towards bigger industries or bigger corporations or bigger builders or all of these outside of New Milford forces and saying, what do you guys want? Like that's kind of what it feels like. And that's not a nice feeling as, you know, a taxpayer. I grew up in this town. I moved here when I was 4. So I graduated in New Milford 2003. Like, there's a lot of people that still live in this town that grew up here because it's like the perfect ecosystem. And it really just feels like rapidly it's losing that. And it comes back to who's leading the ship and who are they serving.
Well said.
Yeah. So let's talk about the water, because that's like a really kind of pervasive topic and a really big topic. So what can you tell us? Well, land use, right? That's kind of like more of the overarching.
Encompasses a lot.
It encompasses a lot, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in that is water.
Mm-hmm.
So what is going on?
So, yeah, I mean, it's such a great question. And when you say, you know, water, and people say, you know, water is source, you know, water is life. There's no life without water. And
There's no life without
everybody
water.
wants to protect water. You know, it's an accepted thing. And what gets so frustrating is that you look at policies and decisions that are being made daily, and water is not being protected. So it's like, you know, we're talking the talk, we're not walking the walk. So
Right.
Everybody agrees water is crucial and we must protect water. But when it comes to actually making the sacrifice, and it will take sacrifice, we will have to start doing things differently. I don't have all the answers right now, but it is going to be sacrifice and a change, because we must protect what we already have. In fact, a lot of what we already have is already, you know, affected.
When you say sacrifice, though, what does that, overarching, what does that look like?
I think it means the thing that we want to do as a town government, which would be very easy, which we can talk about, you know, in a little bit, but you might not be able to make that move, like put the DPW over the aquifer.
Right? Okay.
That decision needs to be thought of,
Gotcha.
you know, with a different lens.
Understood.
I mean, I got into, it's funny that this is all happening now too. It's sort of beautiful. But in 2020, I was asked to be part of the Sustainable CT. I don't know if you know that whole initiative.
Mm-mm.
It's a statewide initiative to get towns to be more sustainable.
Oh, I love that.
They get sort of accreditations. And New Milford had the bronze, and in 2020 they wanted to get the silver.
Mm-hmm.
So I was asked to be on this team, and it was actually really a fun community building endeavor. It was like 100 different volunteers from all over the town, all different ages, and I was asked to basically manage the natural resource and wildlife inventory. And my husband and I wrote the chapter on water resources.
Oh, wow.
So we studied the wetlands and the vernal pools and the streams and the rivers and, the largest man-made lake in Connecticut and the aquifer, and it was just incredible to see this, all the watersheds. We have 8 watersheds. So water is a big part of our
community.
Well, it's part of our community. It's just sort of, you talk about like the crucial underlying things that sort of make New Milford special. Mm-hmm. And there is a lot of incredible water coming through.
Yeah, no. You're totally right. You can't drive anywhere in New Milford getting anywhere without passing a glorious body of water.
Right.
You're right.
So it's 8 watersheds. And anyway, so there was also another document being done at the same time, which is the POCD.
What's that?
Which is the Plan of Conservation and Development.
Yeah. Okay. Right.
I've called it POCD so long that the
actual... I know. No.
Right. So the Plan of Conservation and Development, which is done every 10 years or so, and it was being done in 2020, but because of COVID, I think they finally got it out in 2023. And there is a chapter in there on conservation of water. So the number one goal in that chapter is to protect water and enhance the quality of surface and groundwater. And 68% of the people who were surveyed for that, and I think there was a fair amount of the residents were surveyed, said that was a priority for them.
I actually remember filling that out, yeah.
Yeah, it was a very well
Oh, yeah, I do remember. Yeah. Okay.
So the priority was to protect our water. So really it's staggering to think that the mayor could be even conceiving of putting our Department of Public Works over our aquifer right now, because the Department of Public Works is the department that sort of does the most toxic type of activities, right? They do car maintenance, cleaning cars, fuel storage. In fact, when many DPWs move locations, those become sort of brownfields.
What does that mean?
It was completely contaminated soil under DPW, and I wonder if when we move, if and when we do move ours, it will probably take years to clean that up. So the plan is to put that over the aquifer right now. Now in 2012, New Milford signed on to the aquifer protection regulations from Hartford. So we got our own aquifer protection agency. So we have a group of a governmental body of people. It's the same people who are on the inland wetlands, and their mandate is to protect the aquifer. So I don't know how this can get through that agency.
It was like that was the agency. No, not the aquifer agency. It was the inland wetlands that
the same
I went
people.
and spoke at.
Same people.
And it was wild to me because, again, the interconnectedness of Earth, you can't delineate one from the other. Wetlands and the aquifer go hand in hand. I understand the purpose of having specific bodies to just primarily focus on that. I get it. But in the conversation specifically about this, because it was the application for them to be able to put DPW over it, and I was just appalled. Like, I remember being a child in elementary school here at Hill and Plain, and then these people came in to talk about pollution and, had this whole assembly, And it really lit me up. And I was like, humans cannot behave like this. We can't do this anymore. What are we doing? And here I am, going to be 40 this year. And I'm standing here having a conversation with people in New Milford. And like, we're still behaving the same way. Like, can we stop? But anyways, my point is that I couldn't speak about the aquifer while I was in the wetlands meeting. And I can't get to the aquifer meeting until it passes out of wetlands. And I was like, this is wild and such a broken system because they go hand in hand. And we're talking about, I mean, I worked for EMS, I said that. So the amount of oil and gas, like all of the nonsense that goes on in those places, to no fault of anybody's, it's just part of what we have to do here. But on Earth to, maintain what we have built, fine. But I'm well aware of, the spills and all of the stuff that goes on and just human behavior. So to even talk, to even bring up putting something like a DPW over an aquifer is absolutely ludicrous. Like, you have lost common sense thinking at this point if this is really what you're talking about, because that's everybody's water. Everybody. If you have a public well in town, if you have town water, it doesn't matter. It's coming out of the same field underneath the ground. It just, the delivery is different, either to your house, either you get it through the town or you get it through your well. It's all tapping into the same field. So that will be everybody. So that part was like just mind-blowing to me. And again, so that's why I really love that you look at, you want to kind of change up those frameworks, because that shouldn't happen. Like that conversation shouldn't be in a box like that way.
And also it should be an open and closed, case, because the regulated activities that they want to do, they're called regulated activities, which are all of the things that happen at DPW, are by law, by this thing that we signed on in 2012, by signing that we accept the regulations. That means that we cannot do those functions over the aquifer. So we are already protected, but somehow they're
trying to get around
side-dooring it, right? Or backdooring it, or whatever. So it's a real head scratcher. And I too brought up I went and spoke at that when it was in the wetlands, and I brought up the public trust doctrine, which is a piece of legislation that essentially says we have a public trust doctrine, which means we have a right to, a defensible right to air, water, and the land that surrounds and is underneath the water. And that was also rejected as part of the aquifer conversation, which really it wasn't. I mean, I was kind of getting at the point that the number of parking spaces that they want to add, so not only are they trying to move the DPW, but it's really an industrial complex that they're putting. It's a much bigger, maybe 3 times the size, and the amount of parking spots that they're putting in there is, so the impervious ground that would be over the aquifer it's really quite something. And so you wonder if all the storm drains that they're talking about, they say they all pass the test. However, this is also in a flood zone, and the storms that we've been having recently are with so much more water than anyone has ever seen. So what might have passed in the past, no longer will be sufficient. So if it fails, that means it spills into our aquifer, our streams.
Because impervious surfaces, meaning things
makes the water just slides, goes right down into. So if with that type of rainwater, with those drains could fail. So.
And they're already in a flood zone.
This issue is not over. We still are in this fight, and I hope that the town is revved up about it, because it is our water. It's our water, and it just should be a done deal.
Okay, so bring it to the other issue with the water, which is the PFAS.
Oh, right, the PFAS.
Again, not an easy conversation to have, because this is now international. It is everywhere. Human beings are now indivisible from PFAS. That is a fact. It is in newborn babies' blood. It is now everywhere. Mm-hmm. It's about capping it and controlling it and understanding the sources of it and mitigating that. From a health perspective, PFAS are hormone disruptors, which your hormones are your messengers in your body. They tell your body to do everything. They cause infertility. They cause cancer. They cause a lot of autoimmune issues, autoimmune diseases. They cause a lot of health problems in only a little bit. Like you don't need an insane amount to be exposed to you to have a problem. And here we are in New Milford, and it's in our water, but it's in our water in higher levels than it should be. And in specific areas in New Milford, it's like really high and kind of crazy. And we formed this coalition, which is actually where we got this really cool team of people. Like, out of this community action group that formed came this really awesome group of people who are not standing for the town's kind of misdirection right now, and we've kind of had it. So that's who's running with us. But furthermore, the concerns from the public and what do we do and where do we go? Can we just open up a conversation about it? Because that doesn't even want to happen. Like, because it's hard to talk about these things without having all of the answers. It's hard on a national level. It's hard on an international level. What are we going to do here in New Milford, though, to keep our residents as informed and directed in the right place as we can? Is, I think, what we can handle right now.
Yeah, and which should have been happening, back in 2023 when it was brought right to council. Instead of burying it under the rug, it should have been, nobody's blaming anybody in leadership right now for the PFAS issue. No. This is coming from, DuPont and 3M that created these chemicals years ago. And like you said, they're all over the world, and their nickname is Forever Chemicals.
Right.
And there are a lot of people who live in these areas you were talking about who've had many members of their family have had cancer. Some have,
rare cancers, like things that 3 people in a household get, where now you see, okay, there's an exposure here. What's happening in this area? Like, it's kind of obvious.
I said we should do a health cluster study. Is there? We don't know. There's a lawsuit. There's a lot of unknowns still.
Right.
There is a lawsuit pending, and there is a known. The landfill is leaking fluid. I don't know. Leaking might be the wrong word, but fluid is coming into the Housatonic River, and it is part of the lawsuit, and that has very, very high levels of PFAS. That's going right into the Housatonic River. It has been officially reported, and nothing has been done about it. And that is a mandate of the inland wetlands. They are to check out and investigate any report of effluent leaking into any water body. So that's frustrating.
Why do you think they're not? I'm so curious.
I don't know. It's just maybe they don't want it identified or addressed. It's not their problem, it's the company's problem, maybe. I don't really know. I think it's something that we have to get answers to. But I think that I was very upset by the fact that there was no help for people. I mean, those tests, we had our water tested when this all happened because I was very concerned.
Right, we did too, yeah.
It was a very expensive test. It was $600, that test. It's $300 for the initial, and then it's another $3 if you have any type of positive reading. And I thought, we have ARPA money coming back. So this is federal dollars that were going out from COVID, and they were allocated to different needs around town, and those needs were either not spent or it ended up costing less, so the town returned ARPA funds. And I remember I went to council and said, why are we not, people who cannot afford to test their water, these funds should be given, towards helping them.
Great
and
idea.
Maybe if we all pull together and there are lots of tests, we can bring the price down. I mean, these were all conversations that could have been had.
Great idea.
So we know that a lot of community wells were very high. We know some private wells were high. And the interesting thing, too, is that how quickly it went from, 70 PPT was the most that you could have.
Right.
And then within 2 years, the EPA brought it down to 10 PPT.
Right.
So when I was sitting on town council, it was 10 PPT. And our wells, our community wells, were all right below 10. They were all kind of in the 8s and 7s. Maybe some of them were a little bit over. I can't quite remember. And I said to them that the EPA was pushing through this legislation because they had come to the conclusion, after all their research, that there is no safe amount of PFAS to consume in drinking water. No safe amount. And so the 4 is really just a margin of error.
Right. They
number.
have to, yeah.
So I was making that case on council, and they were all like, well, it is 10. It's 10, so we're fine. And I was like, why don't we get ahead of the game here?
Right.
Because there is infrastructure money that is intended to be used for cleaning up water systems.
Right.
Right.
That's what the ARPA money was for.
Well,
was
the infrastructure the infrastructure
infrastructure
money is for like cleaning out the lead pipes that are everywhere, and it's really, and there are specific mentions of PFAS that it could be used for that. So there are grant money, so as the PFAS issue is becoming more and more widely known, more and more towns are going to probably go for that grant. So you want to get ahead of it and say,
Right.
we want to use this money to see how bad the contamination is. But again, it just was met with resistance.
Yeah.
And I don't understand. So that was frustrating, and we continue to sort of be in the same place with it. But there are filters, and so Aquarian, who owns our water, they are saying that they will be putting a filter in at some point, and so that they have 3 years to comply. So even though now they're over the 4 PPT, they say they have 3 years to bring it down by filtering it. So it's not good.
Okay. Wow. Yeah, that's it's a wild conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So let's take a break real quick and bring it back, and we'll pick up maybe with zoning. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
All right, cool, girl. Let's go. All right, and we're back. That was good. Okay, so into zoning we go.
Into zoning.
I have an amazing social media manager. I don't do all of the fun things that, people see on Facebook for my business. I have somebody that is brilliant that comes in and helps me. And we were chatting about this the other day. And she had seen my paper, and she's like, zoning? What is zoning anyways? And I was like, brilliant question. Thank you so much for asking that. Because, again, I think that part of the disconnect between communities and government is that they have no tangibility. Like, it's just such a different language. There's a disconnect there that's natural anyways. And then here in our town, it seems to be just way more inflated. But understanding why these things are important and why, as a citizen, you actually do need to care about this. Like, look at me. I went from 0 to sitting here in a really short amount of time because all of a sudden it's tangible now. Like, this directly affects every single thing about my life and the lives of my neighbors. People do need to understand this, and that's part of the problem, is that it's just such a foreign language. So please tell me what zoning is, Hillary. I would love to know.
It's such a good question, and it is actually like a really kind of hard and abstract one. So let's try to break it down. It is, it's a way of categorizing the world into homogeneous blocks for the ease of regulation. That's basically
Speak that in human language.
So, for example, in New Milford, we have about 30 or 35 different zones. And they are not changeable, and there are lines drawn around them.
Okay.
So there are probably, I don't know, there's residential zones, industrial zones, commercial zones. It basically means what you can do in that area.
Okay.
So the regulations there are different types of residential zones, but it's very specific to which box you're in, what you can do on that land.
Okay.
Right. So it's very fixed and permanent, and but the thing is, our zoning regulations are not in stone. We make our zoning regulations, right? They are created by us. This is a construct that started in the early 1900s, and
how old are our zoning regulations?
I think that some have been changed along the way a little bit. I don't know the exact, maybe like along the way they've come, but I think that the hardest part about the zoning conversation is that it encompasses a larger, harder conversation, which is that across our country, in many towns and cities, we are unable to finance what we need. So we are build. We build more highways, we build more roads, we build more developments, we build more buildings, we build big, huge mega projects, and we are unable to finance what we have already built. So it is not bringing true prosperity. So we have to, let's see, how can I dive into this a little deeper? I think that there's this interesting book I was reading when I was studying to become a teacher, my Montessori degree. I was looking at, I was writing a paper on Maria Montessori's concept of cosmic education, which is the fact that everything is, you've said this, which is beautiful, everything is interconnected.
Amen.
Okay, and it is actually in the Montessori education is the seed where all children sort of get ignited in their love of learning and their curiosity. Every year we start with the story of the universe's creation. And then throughout the curriculum, they sort of start to draw these connections between, organisms and, the universe. And when I was doing this paper, I read this incredible book called Simply Complexity by Neil Johnson. And this book was talking about how complicated things are made up of different parts that are knowable and predictable. Like you think of a watch or an engine in a car. And you can know those parts, and you can, predict what's going to happen in the watch. Complex systems are made up of a lot of different moving parts. Like think of the solar system. That is a complex system. It involves a lot of moving parts that are going to interplay with each other and create dynamic that are much harder to predict. So if you're thinking of, let me think of a complex system, like a traffic jam.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So if you're thinking...
I was thinking the human body.
The human body is another good one.
You're right.
So if you're thinking, I want to get home, which way should I go? And then you think of the 28,000 other people that are doing the exact same thing at the exact same moment, all trying to use the same system in different ways, you come up with a traffic jam. So the problem I see with the way we look at towns and our problems here is that we're looking at our problems as complicated problems. It's like a whack-a-mole. Separate departments have their problems, and so we're kind of whack-a-mole.
Like wetlands in the aquifer.
Right.
Like
exactly.
They don't communicate for some reason.
Exactly. They're not related, right?
You couldn't talk. Yeah. Right.
So we're missing the connectivity. We're missing the fact that our town is a complex habitat, right? So we have to start understanding the connections the efficiencies. So it's solutions and problems that we're missing because we're separating, we're isolating. And zoning is part of that, because some of our solutions might take untangling some of those zoning regulations. And because here's the other big difference. Complicated systems don't adapt, right? They just break. Complex systems will die if they do not adapt. So they're constantly taking in feedback. Right. They're taking in feedback. So towns need to take in feedback. That's not working. We got to try something else. And that's how they adapt.
Wow.
So it's little incremental changes. And that's how towns, and cities used to, there was no zoning, and that's how they used to grow. Somebody would add on a little something here and a storefront here, and lo and behold, this, it was incremental, slow changes, and the feedback gave you your answer of that's where, got to go this direction now. So I think that there's a lot of room. And again, this is a tough one. I do not have answers immediately, but I think that there are a lot of towns doing really interesting things right now, like taking away parking minimums, making having accessory units easier so that you don't have to jump through hoops, because then it becomes unaffordable. So
what does that mean? What is the parking minimums?
So parking minimums are a zoning thing. Based on your zone and what you're doing, you have to put in a certain number of parking places. So if I were putting in an accessory apartment over our garage, I would have to add another parking space. And maybe the person I'm renting to doesn't want to have a car.
Oh, okay.
So you're regulated to do something that so there's more impervious surface. There's more, so it's...
Wow, that's really dynamic.
It's dynamic. It's also solutions to our housing problem. It's solutions to, a lot of the things that we're struggling with, but it happens to be, rooted in zoning. And Minnesota just across the state said there are no parking minimums. So they did it statewide, which is incredible.
So like if a store wants to come in, they don't have to add extra spaces.
Right.
Okay.
It's up to them. My point of saying that a lot of towns and cities across the country are doing this is that there are things that we can study. There are people we can talk to. There's, so we don't have to go it alone, and we don't.
Right, we're not forging the way. People are also being dynamic and exploring other options.
Right, so we can look at another rural town of our size and see, what's working, what's not. Should we try that, or So that's kind of, I think, where it's been very fixed mind, and I didn't realize they were really flexible regulations, that they actually could be changed. I really thought that we had to stick with what we had, and that was that, because the way that our zoning
runs
board
things
talks about them, you think that it's
they're hard
cut
and fast,
in stone.
right.
Yeah. So that's
gotcha. Okay. So another thing that you brought up in that, which kind of touches on the next topic that we wanted to cover, which is affordable housing and all of the development that's coming in, was, I don't know if you want to bring it in through the accessory.
The 830G.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and it's not really, I guess it's related to zoning, but not as much. It's like responsible development.
Well, right, responsible development. You had talked about accessory units.
Yes.
So that was more of the responsible development, yeah.
830G is a piece of legislation out of Hartford that is trying to address our housing shortage. So, two things can be true. I think we have to address our housing shortage, yes. But I am very against this legislation, 830G. I don't think it's serving rural communities in Connecticut well at all. Because what happens is a developer can come in, and if they have a certain percentage of units in their building, they can override all zoning. So this sounds like a little complicated, because it sounds like I was fighting for the other thing. But basically a developer can come in and build as high as they want. So the height minimums and the, some of the setbacks, all those things do not apply. So they can override our zoning based on the fact that they have a certain percentage of affordable housing units. So it sounds like a good thing, but what happens is you get out of town developers that don't know our town and don't understand if they're putting it here, does it matter, or here. So you look at the big, huge building going up next to the police station, and there are many of these that have been developed that they haven't started building yet. So I think we've got 3 or 4 that have been approved.
And once they're approved, they're done. It's
a done deal.
They're in.
Yeah,
okay.
they're in. You can't. I mean, you can appeal it. I think when it's going through, but I don't think we did. I don't think we've tried a single appeal. So I have been calling publicly for a moratorium, which means like a stop to the 830G until we figure out our plan, right? Because you think of a development, if they're bringing 80 to 150 units in, that has a tremendous effect on our town services. So if every single unit has 2 children, think of the school system, right? It costs $16,000 to educate one child in our school system. So a year. So, and for fire, for police, for ambulance, using the roads, it does have impact, and we need this is something that's done, a lot of towns do this. They do an impact study, and on how many units can New Milford absorb before it breaks us, or before we need a new fire department, or and then we have to say, do we want that? And in fact, that happened. We approved a new fire expansion to one of our fire departments for $5 million because of these developments. So that was on top of our budget of last year. The fire department came to town council and said, because of all these units coming, we have to add another. So you think about tax dollars, and again, it goes back to, I do believe that every human being deserves a house, home, and that is a fundamental human need, and I believe that. But the way we get there is really important. And this also is talked about in the Plan of Conservation and Development, the POCD, which was done in 2020. Our mayor literally has a blueprint of how to get this done, how to create more housing in our town. Because once you hit 10% affordable housing units in your town, then the 830 doesn't apply. 830G doesn't apply. So developers couldn't override our zoning. So in that POCD is a prescription, suggestions of what we could do to get there. And I don't think any of them have been done. It's certainly not been talked about. And again, those are sort of more incremental changes. So it's a head scratcher. I think we need leadership to stop where we are right now and figure out what's coming, get all the departments together. I don't know if he's done that. We should know.
We should know. It's our town. I would be heartbroken if a huge building goes up anywhere near downtown. Like that would be wretched. Mm-hmm. That would really be wretched. Like, this doesn't need to be a Norwalk. This doesn't need to be even a Danbury. I mean, my husband literally just came home yesterday driving through Brookfield, and he's like, I can't believe how many condo complexes they have put up.
They got a moratorium.
They got a moratorium.
They just got a moratorium.
Probably because their community was like, what is happening to our beautiful town? Mm-hmm. And, right, I'm not against expansion and growth. Like, that's a beautiful thing. But let's be wise about it. And it doesn't feel like, again, using kind of like a boat. You don't just go out and drift in the water and go wherever. Have a course and have a plan that's based on your community's input and your ability to lead. And that's the direction in which you're supposed to guide the ship.
Yep.
End of story. Yep. End of story. And it really does feel like this government is a little bit more concerned with developers coming in and what that all looks like in tax abatements and all of that conversation, then really instilling and recharging the heart in our community, because I mean that's a topic we can bring up in a couple minutes, but zoning definitely sounds dynamic.
And zoning weighs in on that, right? So a lot of the problems could be solved in zoning, whether it's denser zoning. You can have a form-based zoning is what it's called, and so you can have an area that has you could put 2 houses on one lot. It doesn't have to be single-family housing all throughout New Milford, right? So zoning can start to make small incremental changes where we're getting more housing, because we want young people to be able to afford a starter home.
Yeah, right.
And we want local builders to do the jobs. And right now, neither of those things are happening. Developers come in and they bring their people, so it's not local jobs. So we want local jobs. We want, to control where it goes, and we want to make it incremental so that people can stay here, that want to stay here, and young people can come in, and we can create that middle income and low income missing housing, right?
That would be really cool. So being able to like put an in-law cottage or something like that in your backyard.
Putting an
something
in-law
like
cottage
that.
in your backyard.
Okay.
Putting an apartment over the garage.
Right. And then not having to be mandated to put a parking spot. That's like that. I didn't even think of that. That's wild.
And right now you have to go through so many hoops to get there that it's cost prohibitive for some people, because you've got to hire an architect and do a plan, and then you go to zoning and you have to kind of know all that zoning stuff to get through zoning.
Yeah, actually, I have a friend of mine who's a single mother who we often talk about changing her. She has a space above her garage, detached garage, and she's like, it's ridiculous, like what you would have to do
it. Then then you start to lose the profit and the time, and it's intimidating, and people just say, oh, forget it.
Right.
So again, we could look at other towns and see how many units were they able to put in if they changed this this zoning regulation in this type of a space, and I think that would be really, really productive and helpful. But again, I'm willing to. I think I do think that there are people with multiple degrees out there, town planners, that could also be utilized, to help us in this.
I've heard that
in this
a lot.
Area.
Yeah,
we need
a
town planner for some of these really big issues. Like we need somebody this is their thing. We might not agree. We might not want to go with what they're saying, but we need expertise to sort of collaboration.
Right. That's like the whole thing.
Yes.
It's such a great thought to be able to like put myself inside the room where you have the town council meetings and actually intaking information from the community. Like people have such brilliant brains and talents and gifts, and to be able to utilize that from a governmental space, like that's how it should be done. And fine, we've forgotten that, but like let's remember and wake up so we can get this ship back on the road. Or on the road. You don't put ships that are on the road. On track.
But there's also a budget. There's a budget line item for town councils. I think it's $30,000 a year for consultants.
Whoa. Oh, wow.
Have we ever seen it? I mean, maybe there was one sort of economic developer person that came when I was on council. That was it. But so there's funding there already built into the budget to have these robust conversations with people who do this for a living and would analyze our town or do the impact study or the traffic study.
That sounds amazing. That sounds like exactly what we need. That really sounds like exactly what we need. That would clean up so much.
I do. I really think so.
Okay, I'm about to bring up a really hot topic. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Riverfront.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, what is this about? Why? This ties into DPW. Like this is so pervasive in everything that we've been talking about. It even touches water. Give me a little overview of what this project is supposed to look like on paper after the third write-up of it or whatever we're at now.
Yeah, I can't quite keep track, actually, to be honest, but maybe the second iteration I can speak to. And I think we just dropped $500,000 of ARPA funding just this past week or two for the next.
So $500,000 just for planning, just to draw plans for something that the public hasn't been able to weigh in on yet.
I guess it's more specific plans for builders. It's something maybe you could put out to bid. I don't really know the specifics. But I think that it is hard to get the full picture in the sense that, how much they call it like little townhomes, down by where DPW is. They're saying there will be townhomes.
Where is DPW, if people don't know?
So by Youngs Field, if you keep right there.
Passing Youngs Field, right, okay.
So I think that it is trying to do so many things, and ultimately it's a development project. That's what I think. I originally, when I moved to New Milford, when it was, at its very beginning stages, I was kind of a fan of it. I was like, okay, this, develop the riverfront. There's potential there. There's, maybe it should be more of a place that people gather and, However, having lived here now for so long, this is in a flood zone. So that is almost a showstopper right there. It is in a flood zone. It has flooded 3 times that I've been here for the riverfront, the River Fest, right? And that's somewhere where they
Route
have
7
to
was closed for a long time last year, just last year.
Yeah, so that's a problem right there. And I think that the amount of money, so the moving of DPW is directly tied into this because they want to have that available for development. So that's why we have to move we do need a new building for DPW, of course, but I think that's
we have
the real
a lot of
push
other
right now
places to put it, though,
because they want to have that available. And then there is a big, their drawings online, so they've got sort of this phony ice rink thing in the winter and an amphitheater type seating. And the thing about it is, if we don't want a development, which a lot of residents do not want, right, especially in a flood zone, and nobody's talked about how much it's going to cost. We've never heard how much it's going to cost. Just to move DPW, I heard, based on the plan that we're seeing, $20 to $30 million for that.
Right, and that's just
bill.
on paper.
Just DPW going over. So we've not heard any numbers. And the thing is, you could take pieces of the riverfront and do it. Like, put in the amphitheater seating, make it a nicer, transition between town down to the Young's Field. A lot of people really love watching the baseball games there and playing there, and the playground's great and the tennis courts are great. So we do have a lot of that. And then the river trail could connect south to Brookfield. So you could bring the river trail down so you'd have your recreation thing. So I think that it's gotten a little confused as to, is this a recreation thing, which it started as, or is this a big development thing where there's going to be a hotel, lots of townhomes, with commercial space underneath it, a big tall building on Patriots Way, 2 big tall buildings. So basically from town you might even be blocked. I can't quite tell from the drawing, but you know how when you're on Bank Street it's quite lovely to look straight
you can
down.
See all the way down, yeah.
So I'd like to see sort of a 3D model. Maybe that will be in this $400,000 thing. So that's kind of that's where I am on. I'm confused by it. I think what I hear is there is not a lot of support.
No, it doesn't seem like there's a lot of support. And I think that a lot of people are really upset because what seems to be happening is that little pieces of it are getting passed incrementally without it being brought to the public. Like, hey, would you guys like this super thing right smack dab in the middle of your downtown? Yes?
You're totally
okay.
Right.
Then we're going to move forward, and these are the steps that we're going to take. No? Okay. Then please, developers, take your plans and go elsewhere. Because it seems to be like they're approving it, and they're dribbling it in, and then all of a sudden it's going to be... Because there was just some talk the other day I saw online where somebody had come out and said, oh, yeah, the public will get their voices heard eventually, but... Again, by who? Like, our government doesn't actually listen. They just intake, and then that's it. They don't actually integrate anything that we're saying.
You're totally right. You're totally right. And this is how they operate. So it's basically saying all the way along, oh, yes, the public will decide, the public will decide, the public will decide, but it gets so far down the track.
And you're telling me that this third plan has cost somewhere between $400,000 and $500,000? Like, how much did we spend for the first one and the second one?
Yeah, I don't know. I wasn't on council at that time.
Like, that's what?
Yeah.
We have dirty water, and you're doing what? Like, nursing school, spiritual practices, you have... a rise in what's important, and safety and security and clean air and clean water, and these things are all at the bottom across the board, like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You don't move to the next one until you secure all the ones at the bottom, and we have a lot of broken pieces of that big chunk at the bottom in our town. So what are we talking about spending an exorbitant amount of money.
That's it right there.
Like, this is wild. In a flood zone. Again. What? Moving DPW over the aquifer.
Yep.
Putting a huge complex in a flood zone. Because that floods, man. That floods, like, serious floods. Mm-hmm. So where does that water go? And now you're having the river rise up and enter what? Enter the storefronts? Like,
they probably put up, that's probably why it will be so costly, is they'll probably put up, buffers and raise the levels, and I don't know.
But then where does that water go?
Right.
Because it has to travel somewhere. So now you're pushing it down the line somewhere else, or up the road towards those other townhouses in Agway and all of those areas. Like, it has to go somewhere. So again, back to like the in the box thinking, like, we make these little decisions on such a microcosmic level without understanding that you are you're part of a macrocosm. So zoom out, and take it all into consideration, and then move forward with appropriate decision making. And that does not seem like it's happening. It's just getting more nuanced and more specialized and more specialized and more specialized. And zooming in doesn't help anybody.
No,
it doesn't help anybody.
And the thing is that the more and more money that's spent on it, people feel like, oh, it's it's too late now. We've done this. We should just go with it.
Right,
because it starts to feel like that's a lot of our money.
It's like cooking a frog and
exactly.
You're just like,
so then you're just in it, and you no longer can pull out of it. And there's plenty of pieces to it that could be nice. So it's not like throw the whole thing out, but again, the public has not weighed in. The conversations have not been recently. I mean, they did that, because they claim in the very beginning, they brought the town in and had lots of public meetings, but that was probably 6-7 years ago, right?
Yeah.
It was 2020. I think it was before all the sustainable. Yeah, so it was 2019.
And how did they call the public in? How did that happen? Because the network that we have here in town between the communication inside our government and the community is zero.
Yeah.
We get more weather and traffic alerts from the mayor's office than anything in my email box, and none of it is pertinent to this type of information. So the system is broken, and it's broken on purpose, it seems like, for a lack of transparency. So if you really wanted to know what the public had to say about anything, including calling them out for budget meetings, or including calling them out for voting or anything, like, there's a really easy way to do that. Going online and
they could do a referendum. I mean, this is that important. If it's going to be upwards of $100 million, they should do a referendum.
And a referendum is?
It's a vote, right? So the budget, they could put a question at the end of the budget if they didn't want to pay for a whole referendum on their own. But when it's this kind of dollars, I think you really do have to offer every single person a vote, because it will change. And then what is the yearly upkeep for such a thing, right?
What is the yearly upkeep for such a thing? And then you mentioned stores on the bottom. I was talking to a friend of mine who owns a small business over at the Bleachery. Well, it's a pretty beautiful large business over at the Bleachery. Mm-hmm. And she's a transplant here, and she's like, wow, this town, like, from the outside looks beautiful, like, it's perfect. But when you get into it, you realize that there's no heart here. Like, it's not the small community that you think that it is, because you drive down the Green and it's beautiful, and you drive down Bank Street and it's like just so quintessential New England, right? Which hopefully it stays that way, because these developers want to just develop it, and then you lose all of that intimacy and all of that beautifulness that we do have here. But to her point, she's like, it really lacks that. There's no intimacy. There's no interconnection. Like, yes, we do come out for, Rock the Block on Thursdays in the summertime, and that's awesome. And I heard rumors that's like the Sip and Stroll didn't even do very well this past year. Like, they were really trying to pull people out because there's no real emotional connection. There's no real draw. People don't have to leave their houses now to do much of anything. You can do whatever. You get everything shipped to you, right to your house. So really focusing on the heart of this town is important. I've talked to a couple other business owners like on Bank Street who, compared to surrounding towns that do, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 on the weekends in the busy season, like they're not doing that at all. And it's it's like I could cry because our town is just glorious and it has so much potential. But there's no heart and there's no connection between our leaders and our community and the small businesses and the town, and there's no weave. There's no really good contact points between all of them. And so to hear that they want to put businesses on the ground floor of this development when we have these amazing, already established businesses who are not doing well and could really use the support and the spotlight from our town in a much doable way, in a very easily doable way, is really...
It's troubling.
It's very troubling.
Yeah, it's troubling. And I saw an amazing post by a store owner who was saying, like, please weigh in. What would make it easier for you guys to come down? What would make it appealing to come down to the store? She put it out there herself. I think there's so much. This gets into economic development a little bit, which I think we should definitely dive into in a deep way. But I think that I don't know if they're trying to lure outside businesses in, and that's the priority. But I think a lot of local businesses don't feel supported and don't feel, there has to be, it has to be intentional. I mean, this is a whole business, economic development and supporting businesses and finding out what we could do to make their lives easier and to get people, and how to create that heart. So what is that? That's like a really intangible, hard to describe thing.
Correct.
But it has to do with people feeling like they're part of a community.
That's it.
So what builds that? What creates, what is community building and how do you do it? Why did we get rid of Village Fair Days?
It's service.
What? It's service.
It's
service. It's engagement.
Yes.
It's having a stake in it. But people don't feel like they have a stake in it because they don't have any voice, right? So you don't feel connected. So you'd rather just stay in your house because, what's going on down there? I don't know. That store closed. That one's closed.
Those are empty. That's empty. That one just moved out. That one's empty. Right. I mean, look at all of the new development that we have in the strip malls down by Walmart and Stop and Shop. Like, there's so many empty ones. So really, we need more when, like, we're losing.
Build, build, build. That's how you have to get, that's how you pay for it all. Because if it's empty, then you got to build something new to bring you, it's a game, and we're not winning, right? So we have to get smarter. We have to get back to, what we're talking about here. The heart, real, what do people want? How do we create community? How do we, take a pause and figure out what we all want? And I think I can sense that out there.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we're alone in feeling like this. Everybody's sick of fighting with everybody, and, there's a lot of hard stuff happening, right? So it's the perfect opportunity to say, let's come together. Let's be a community, and we can do it. We have amazing community feeling here, right?
Oh,
when something goes wrong, what I mean is when something goes wrong, the community shows up.
Oh, yeah.
You see it. So it's there.
That's in the
there. It's just not, they're kind of out on a tether, right? We need more reasons to come together and more buy-in, more stakeholders.
I love it.
Yeah.
Anything else that you'd like to talk about?
I think that's good. I think we should do this again.
Yeah. So the next time we do this again, some of the topics are going to be supporting farmers.
Yes.
How do we do that in a, again, more cohesive, more connected, more intimate way where they're not like out here just doing their own thing. I really feel like the community needs to understand, like, that they're the backbone of society. It's where your food comes from. It's where your food should come from, and just the health aspect of that, from my lens anyways.
And it makes the town more resilient to have local farms.
Oh, forget
Think
it,
about
right?
COVID, when the shelves were empty and
Please.
food was, who knows when food was coming. And, you know, so it is also an economic driver, and, you know, farmers should be respected and heard. And I don't think that they feel they have a platform to talk about, you know, how can they change? How can they be a bigger part of the community?
Right. And like, so
and be empowered.
I'm hanging out at the farmer's market now and seeing all of like these micro farms pop up, like these mushroom farmers, which is like, do you know how good mushrooms are for you? The functional mushrooms, like that's what we're drinking now. Like it's just brilliant what's happening. And then sprouts and microgreens, like I literally could go on for hours talking about them, but the nutritional density in them is, if you have like one broccoli sprout, that's up to 50 times more potent than a head of broccoli. So, like, it's way easier to eat that than it is a whole head of broccoli. And if you have a whole salad bowl full of them, do you know what you just did for your health? Like, are you kidding me right now? But people don't understand this. So, how do we get, because I know people in town are doing this, so how do we get those people shored up so that they could start supplying our community the way that we need
schools,
to. Right, our schools, like educating the farmers on just a little bit of a more holistic lens and understanding how important what they do is, because it's crucial and it's beautiful that they are the human being that was chosen to be the gatekeeper for farmlands. Like that, my heart, I absolutely love it. So, okay. So farming, education, and the social fabric of town are things that we wanted to talk about. Can you just talk about
Which is like an important component to community building, but it's really talking about, you know, what makes up our social fabric, like the youth, the seniors, you know, drug addiction services, special needs event, you know, so really kind of the periphery, what makes up our social network. Yeah.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to talk about really quick was why unaffiliated? Like, why did we choose to do this? Do you want to?
Yeah, it's a great, I think it sort of loops into sort of where I started, which was, you know, really having a local lens instead of a national lens. And I think that there's a lot of noise and places we disagree on out there in the national level, and local issues are things that we can sit around a table and figure out the best way forward together. So I think that I know for myself, dropping my party affiliation was just a way to say I'm trying to do it a different way. You know, I think we need to find solutions together and listen to each other, and you know, put one foot in front of the other, and not, you know, end the sort of the madness, right? The fighting at this other level. That's kind of where I was going into this, and also having been part of this incredible group together, and the water group, where we did just that. We all came together. There was never even a question of what letter was before your name. We all came to those meetings wanting to talk about the water issue, and we're getting stuff done. You know, we're a powerful force, and I think that's we're carrying that forward.
Right, because in an emergency situation, nobody asks questions about that whatsoever. And I think that a lot of the things that we're up against in this town are not necessarily an emergent, like put the fire out, but yes, emergent, put the fire out kind of a situation, like we are. And I think that that's being kind of, there's a smoke screen being held up so that we don't necessarily see that that's actually what's happening. Right, like the initial conversations that we were having about how do we form this group?
Yeah.
It was very much, we're not for politics, we're for the people.
Right.
It's human beings go first, and it shouldn't be this divisive, party splitting type of environment. That's not really what government should embody. There can be balance in the middle, and that's kind of because we bring it all to the table. Right, I dropped my party.
It makes it better.
It makes it easier
when you have
because
different opinions coming to the table, your outcome is going to be stronger.
Exactly. So, with that being said, we are running unaffiliated. So that means, like, strategically, our campaign has to be run a bit different because the campaigns in town generally are run by the committees, that either the Democratic committee or the Republican committee. And those committees themselves take care of fundraising. Those committees themselves take care of kind of strategizing and being strategic with bringing all of the funds in and the campaigning and setting all of that up. So that's really all on us. And something that we heard recently from another potential town council member was that he was talking with somebody who had won town council in kind of a similar vein in another town, and he was saying that they won it with $10 donations, and I absolutely loved that, as did everybody else. So that's really kind of what our call to action is here right now, is that if you are in New Milford and you feel what we're saying, if you want the paradigm shifts to happen in the topics that we brought to the table and then the topics that we're going to bring to the table the next time, then we're asking that you take a moment and you donate just $10. Just $10 to our beautifully constructed campaign, and we'll take that and do some really awesome things. And I can't wait to hear your feedback from this topic, or from these topics. I think one of the things that I know we're going to do is, once we air this, I definitely anticipate a lot of feedback from this. And that's exciting because you have questions you want answers to. We're happy to discuss whatever you want that draws a lot of momentum that we can actually kind of tackle. So
that's right.
Again, we're not for the right, we're not for the left, we're just for forward. We just want to move forward, and to do that, we need your help. So if you could please consider donating to our unaffiliated campaign, we would be ever so grateful.
It'll get us off the, on the way.
Absolutely.
Start us going.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
I loved this.
That
this
was
perfect.
fun. We'll do it again.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to it.
Right. Love it. Thank you.